Hi, my name is Jim Breen and I'm the host of Five Great Scenes, a series that with each episode will take one movie from this collection behind me and dissect five scenes from that movie. Five scenes that I love, that I think are great, to help understand the movie, to understand how the director achieved greatness in those scenes. Now, as you can see, I'm clearly a movie lover. I own 1,300 Blu-rays, but I'm also a visual storyteller. I've written 25 feature screenplays, a few of which have been optioned. I've directed movies ranging from 3 to 60 minutes, and I'm developing 2 comic series right now. So I love visual storytelling. So the other thing to be aware of is these are movies from cinema's past. So these are all older Blu-rays. They're just theatricals in the rearview mirror. I like to do older movies because I find that marketing and the zeitgeist kind of get in the way of really truly looking at a movie. So just be aware of that. And lastly, there will be spoilers in this discussion, so just know that ahead of time. If you haven't seen the movie, please watch the movie. If you're deciding on whether to watch the movie, maybe this will help convince you. Either way, spoilers ahead. So with that said, let's get into this episode's movie. So in this episode, we'll be talking about 1981's Taps, a military drama directed by Harold Becker. Becker is one of my favorites from the 80s. He directed such movies as Vision Quest with Matthew Modine and Linda Fiorentino. The movie was made famous by the single Crazy for You, which Madonna sings in the movie. I think it was her first on-screen appearance in a movie. Sea of Love, his other film, thriller, was Al Pacino's return to films after a few years away for focusing on theater. And then Malice, which is a movie starring Alec Baldwin, Nicole Kidman, and Bill Pullman, among others. And it's really famous for many reasons, but Aaron Sorkin, it was his first produced screenplay. The story of TAPS tells a story of a group of cadets at a military academy who take over the school after they learn that the school board is closing the academy down to make way for condos. It stars George C. Scott, who had won an Oscar playing a general in Patton many years before and is now returning to play a general again in this film. It stars Timothy Hutton, who had just won an Oscar for Ordinary People. So this was his follow-up film to that, I think a year later. It stars 2 very important beginnings for Sean Penn. It was his first starring role, is in a supporting role, and Tom Cruise. This was his big break, essentially, after a small part in like a walk-on in Endless Love. The movie also stars Ronny Cox, famous for Beverly Hills Cop, playing the captain in that, and the villain in RoboCop. He's one of my favorites. And then Evan Handler, famous for many things, but Californication being a series he's on, and Giancarlo Esposito, who's famous now for Breaking Bad and Mandalorian. I selected this movie, I think, in honor of Tom Cruise for his success in Top Gun Maverick, having the biggest success of his career theatrically. And I thought it'd be good to go back to his first movie. I have seen this film many times. I first saw it in 1982. I saw it on cable. I didn't see it at a theater. I was only 12 once again. And so I saw it a number of times, and it just has stayed with me for many years. In talking about the 5 scenes here, I was really fixated and focused on Becker's use of the front gate of the military academy. This is a movie that takes place at academy. So the battlefield, essentially, the movie is the front gate. And so I wanted to really focus in my 5 scenes on these 5 gate scenes that I truly love and I think were executed beautifully. So with that said, let's talk about scene 1.
Scene 1.
So scene number 1 in my 5 greatest scenes is probably the first scene of the movie. It's the opening shots, establishing the world. Now, as the film opens, you see, the first thing you see is the central aisle in a church, a packed church, as you see in this image I have here. And we dolly in slowly, creep up the central aisle towards the altar of this church. Never seeing a face. We're only focused on this empty space. And Becker makes a point of not putting any people in there and drawing your eye towards the carpet, which is red, bright red, right? So this is a stage. And so he pushes in, he dollies in and stops. And we get the appearance of the actor we know, George C. Scott, right? Steps in the center of the stage. And stands there, focusing our attention. Now, after that, we don't have him speak yet. We then focus on a military detail in full colors, walking up the central aisle with and framing him essentially. So this is a movie that's all about ceremony. This isn't about battlefields. This is about ceremony and tradition. And so what we're seeing now is ceremony. Once again, the only people we see now mainly is George C. Scott. We see him framed here in between that detail, right? So after that, you'll notice we cut to him walking over to the altar, right? To this altar area. And look in this image. We have him standing behind this huge eagle. The director's chosen this eagle to be this book, which we'll learn is the Book of the Dead. But this eagle, this is the director doing his job and adding importance to this altar, right? And so, but this is not the event of the scene. When we talk about any scene, we talk from a directorial standpoint, we talk about what is the event of the scene, right? And so we come upon the event of the scene because George C. Scott and the introduction of the world is part of that. George C. Scott is important, but when we cut away, we finally see the crowd. We see it's largely soldiers, so it gives us context of where we're at. So we're seeing soldiers, we're seeing this military detail. But the event of the scene then follows, and that is the playing of the song Taps. And the playing of the song Taps is the event of the scene, because as he plays Taps, as he plays that song, which is probably one of the most memorable pieces of music in human history, we know what it means. That song conveys the emotion and the respect that this movie, in looking at its theme of fallen soldiers and honor, that this is important. And so we focus not on George C. Scott, who starts to then read the Book of the Dead. And he reads it in his own way. And we read these names to let us know that this is a place, this school has birthed soldiers who have lost their lives. So we're given an intellectual context to that song, that this is their sacrifice. This is the school sacrifice. We're near the end of the scene. We have this beautiful image of a bugler framed in the doorway, which you'll see here in the doorway. But this is what's important here, right? We have this frame looking outward. But then Becker does this. He cuts to a wide shot establishing, as we're still hearing, like, I think the Book of the Dead, we're still hearing names. The music is kind of faint, but it's there. As he transitions, we see the church steeple, and he tilts down and lands on the establishing shot of the gate. So we're connecting death and honor and all these things to this gate, which will be so, so, so important to the story. So for me, it's such a great introduction. I mean, and let's keep in mind, he does not show any of the actors, none of these stars beyond George C. Scott. Timothy Hutton isn't shown, John Penn. Normally, you'd see inserts of various actors, right? The key people on the poster. In this case, the theme and taps the event is more important than the establishing of characters. So that is my scene number one. Just wonderful, great filmmaking. Let's step to number two.
Scene 2.
So scene number two of my 5 favorite scenes is a scene once again in front of the gate. Our characters already know the school is going to be closing in the next year, but they are taking a moment to hold a prom of sorts. And so our cadets are in full dress with their dates in long flowing gowns. And in this scene, the local townies, who we have never seen before, we've only seen the people who've entered the gates. A bunch of it seems like it's a Friday night kind of bored crowd who have parked their big red kind of pickup truck outside and are catcalling to the various women coming in, just causing a problem. The interesting thing about this scene is the fact that once again, Becker chooses, when you think about it for a second, these people are arriving at the gate and walking in. There's a full parking lot, like a parade ground they could probably park in. There's probably a place they could drop them off inside this kind of huge campus. But Becker chooses, once again, he chooses the gate for this very crucial scene. So these characters are arriving in various taxis and cars and being dropped off and walking up through the gate. And this is really important because we're going to have this altercation between the outside world and these cadets. And so as you see in this image, you see the local townies. There's only a handful, but that's all they need, right? And it's like maybe 7 or 8, 9. But Becker chooses this kind of smaller guy in the front in the white T-shirt with the blue arms, with kind of 70s style shirt, and he's the spokesperson. Once again, this is the first time these characters are introduced, and the last time, right? This is the outside world encroaching, and so you see JC, played by Giancarlo Esposito, is giving them annoyed looks. You're seeing the tension on their faces, so he's building tension in this scene, right? Of these townies, this outside world pushing up against them, disrespecting them in a time where they are dressed in their full gear. And remember, there are more scenes in this early point of the movie of them in their full dress uniforms to get us on the side of our characters. Because remember, we are the townies outside. We are not these people. So now we can empathize with them. We can be on their side. And this little runt at the front is the one that we should identify with because he's us. But we don't, because he's disrespecting. He's not only disrespecting the cadets, he's disrespecting these women, right? I think the only time women are actually seen in this movie. And so you see this back and forth, building of tension. I think one of them throws a can, just throws a crunched up can. JC walks over and grabs it and tells them to disperse. And they basically, but that can, once again, sets up that tension. Then you have, in this next image, you see Moreland is called over. You see our various shots, to add tension of various cadets. They're clearly pissed off and they want to fight, but they're also, they're in their formal dress wear and they're taught not to. So Moreland steps out and you see this altercation, this face to face, as Moreland's telling them to disperse, and they're disrespecting him, especially the little guy in front. Who is the spokesman. He is the only person that Becker wants us to focus our attention on. As they have this exchange of words, which becomes, in these next frames, you'll see a full-on fight. He swings, he's the one, the townie swings at Moreland first. Brian Moreland, his character, shows restraint, but he still has to defend himself. So they're the ones who strike first. That's important. Then you have the images, you have this altercation, you have this kind of confused quick cuts, relying upon quick cuts. Not a lot of, there's not a lot of, if you'll notice in the scene, there's not a lot of choreography. It's kind of messy kind of wrestling, it's a real fight. It's not supposed to be designed to be Mission Impossible, a later cruise film. And so Beige comes out to stop the fight, right? George C. Scott comes out, and he's pulled into the fight almost immediately. Now, we saw earlier that he has a kind of a ceremonial pistol that he unloaded, or thought he unloaded, and one of the townies immediately grabs for that thing, almost immediately. Now, this is a movie, it's not a violent movie, but this is a movie that's punctuated by violence. And this scene is that punctuation. And so we see the gun get pulled, and the townie, as they're struggling for it, the townie who is on George C. Scott's back, fire, like they both basically fire the gun in the struggle. And our little runt who we hate is shot in this moment. Shot in the chest, wearing that white t-shirt by design. But also remember, this is the only frame when you watch this movie, it's the only moment in the movie where Becker relies upon slow motion. He wants to draw this moment out because we're not on this guy's side, the guy who was just shot. He's an enemy to us. But he wants to draw this moment out because this is a really important scene and changes everything afterward. So he uses that slow motion as he falls. And then we get to see close up with George C. Scott. But more importantly, beyond that first close up reaction, we then get the two shot. Actually, more of a two shot. It's kind of a medium. So you see Hutton and him, our big players on the poster together looking down. And then in one of probably my favorite line readings for a single line character in a movie, you have this sloppy man, townie, on the ground, who tells us that the character's dead. And his delivery of that line, I don't know how many takes that would have taken. He's tousled and he's messy and he's bruised. And the way he says that is absolutely perfect. And we have Scott's reaction saying, "I'm sorry." We have to show remorse immediately because Scott's going to be disappearing after this scene. So because of this, he's only got one more scene. We have to draw out the ending because we're getting the most out of Scott. And so we hold longer, not only on the two shot of Scott and Hutton, but also stepping back and actually ending the scene on the whole crowd as Scott kneels down next to the boy. And that is actually the scene that takes us out. So Becker isn't rushing through this scene. He knows he's getting the most out of Scott in this scene, and we need to feel the weight of what just happened. And so that really is my second favorite scene. So let's focus on scene 3.
Scene 3.
Okay, so now we're moving on to scene number 3. And scene number 3, of my favorite scenes, is actually two scenes that build upon each other, doing the same thing. So in the story, the cadets are in a good place in this scene. Once again, a gate scene. They have the police have been turned away. They were scared by their weapons when they showed up at the gate. They've kind of barricaded themselves. The cadets have barricaded themselves inside so the police can't get in. They've tricked a food supplier to get them food. They had to leave some of the food behind. There were some guns fired to scare people, but no one's been killed or hurt. So they're feeling on top of the world. And we see in this first image, Tom Cruise is in a defense position in front of the gate, in this kind of pillbox, in this surrounded by sandbags, and he's kind of talking. He's making fun of his subordinates, and they're just kind of shooting the shit essentially. And then they hear this sound, and this light falls on them, and Becker uses these shadows of the bars on their faces, as they all scramble into positions because something's coming, right? And we at the audience don't know what's happening because this is going to be their first big challenge. And so they all scramble, and Becker is great at point of view because what he chooses is he chooses Tom Cruise, the character David he plays, raises these binoculars, and we get that long view of that beautiful long residential street that Becker chose to have this convoy. I mean, this is why he chose this street. He wants this long curved residential street just leading straight to it. And so we see the convoy of big National Guard trucks moving their way up. And Moreland, of course, shows up. Hutton shows up. He's next to Cruz for a second, seeing these trucks as a signalman steps out and starts to wave them left and right and left and right. Now he's the only person, that signalman is the only person, as we cut to Sean Penn's point of view in the barracks looking down on the gate. We get that. But more importantly, we get JC's point of view on top of the wall, looking down into that front area, well lit up, because another person steps out, and this is the event of the scene: the arrival of Ronny Cox, the commander of the National Guard. And so he steps out. We don't see him yet. This other figure who moves his way and stands in front of that gate with his arms kind of like on his hands on his hips, authoritative position. And we're still hearing all those trucks, all this noise. There's no dialogue in this scene. We're just watching the arrival. And Moreland has changed his position, is on top of the wall and looks down. And we have the meeting of these two adversaries as Hutton, close up, looks down at Cox, and Cox looks up at him in a weaker position because he's looking down on him. But there's nothing weak about Cox in this scene. Like, Ronny Cox is you can see he's an imposing figure. And so that's the event of that scene, right? The arrival. That last shot of Timothy Hutton, that close up on his face, seeing the reaction, right? So then we cut to a scene that's doing the same thing later on. So the cadets have had a few losses. The authorities have turned off the electricity, so the campus isn't black. And the first thing we hear, once again, is the sound. But this sound is scarier. It's a tank. They hear this tank engine moving its way towards them. But we also see this blue light. And there had just been a fight. So Timothy Hutton and Sean Penn had just had this kind of fight over how Timothy Hutton's kind of commanding the soldiers, and they're bruised and battered, but they all scramble out from this fight, and they're getting to their positions. And that blue light, it's just using that blue light as they all get into positions. But we see that tank heading towards them, and this tank is just, it's huge, and we just see its shadow. And Becker does this great job because all the residences on the outside are also blacked out. So the street outside, all we see is that silhouette and the spotlight of the tank on the front of it, shining that blue light as it finally, we see it heading towards all these scared reactions, these various soldiers, many of the characters we already know. Tom Cruise looking threatening, he's got his gun ready. The tank finally stops and is just blocking the gate. I mean, just threatening, imposing. But what's great is that Becker then has that searchlight as it kind of turns back and forth across the barracks, and it shines into the room of Charlie and Derek, the younger soldiers, who we've kind of seen throughout the movie, who look scared as this blue light shines on them. And Sean Penn, it shines on him on a lower floor as he's kind of nursing his wounds and thinking about where, just in a bad mood, clearly. And then the engine, the light and the engine shut off, and it's silence. And that silence just, boom, falls. And it's just such a great moment as that tank with the lights off now is there. And they've got even more to be afraid of. So that is my scene, kind of both are my scene number 3.
Scene 4.
So now I want to talk about scene 4, my favorite scene, my fourth favorite. Another gate scene. This scene is where Colonel Kirby, played by Ronny Cox, is trying to reason with Timothy Hutton's character, Brian Moreland. And this is just after Giancarlo Esposito, his character of JC, has been burned in an accident when they were trying to start a gas generator. And so the first image we see, you'll see in this image here, you'll see that you'll see JC all wrapped up, being carried on a stretcher out of the gate. We see Moreland watching through the gates. I think they've closed the gates by this point. And so we're seeing Colonel Kirby, played by Ronny Cox, the man we saw in scene 3 arriving. And we see him patting the ambulance to give it the approval after the door is closed for it to pull away. So we start off with a casualty. We start off the scene with the stakes. It's a good lead in to this discussion that Kirby and Moreland are going to have. And so we have Moreland start to walk away. And notice in these frames that Kirby is framed with a bunch of soldiers. They're soft focused. I mean, they're not completely soft focused. You can see what they are. But you can also see Moreland soldiers on the other side with a gate between them, locked between them. And so Kirby calls him back to the gate, and they face off. And this is one where clearly it's more dialogue based, and it's these two people, these two commanders meeting. And the thing that I love about this scene and what I love about this movie is that Kirby, who is the man on the other side in this exchange, he is just doing his job. And one of the things that's great about this movie is the fact that we never see the villains. The school board is the villains, right? The governor is the villain because he's telling Kirby, who is a head of the National Guard unit that is protecting, that is keeping them walled in. On the other side, he works for the governor, and so he's being given orders as well. And what we learn in this is Kirby is actually a very good man. He could have been cast, the character could have been written, and I've never read Father Sky, the book that this is based on, but I just love the writing here because you have these two, Kirby just hitting this movable wall that is Moreland, who is just continuing to follow what he feels Beige would have done, right? What George C. Scott, his mentor, would have done, what he's been taught. And what I love in this debate, it's almost a debate, is the that you want to be on the side of Moreland, but you're seeing the arguments that Kirby is giving. And once again, he's a good, reasonable man, and he's mentioning in this great scene how these boys don't have one hair between their legs, and Moreland is saying, well, that's never been a prerequisite for picking up a gun, in our history. Those kinds of debates, and Kirby pointing out that what he feels that Moreland's a death lover. Like he's never going to see reason because he's seen other men like him. But this debate is not the event of the scene. And as you watch this, notice these. We have these various frames. We never have a close-up. We're saving the close-up because the event of the scene is at the end. And so we have these continuous backs and forths through the gates. And so Becker is once again using those bars to just underline the conflict between these two men as they go back and forth. Now, Moreland Moreland is stoic. He doesn't offer any emotion or very little emotion. He is orders, and even if Kirby's trying to reason with him, he's got a belief system which will crumble in this event happens. And the event is the death of General Beige, of the who we have not seen since he left earlier in the movie. So he says, I'm willing to talk with the school board. We just want to talk to General Beige. He's wanting to get some direction. And this is when he learns that Beige is dead. And that is the event of the scene. And what we have here is a director using various sizes, mediums, medium closes. He only uses a close up on Kirby, on Ronny Cox, when Cox says you're a death lover. So he gets that nice tight. He gets the emotion, and it's such a great moment for Kirby. So he's given a beat there. But we're all building to when Kirby gives him that news. And so we finally get to the moment, and we're finally getting that close up of like almost, I think this close as I remember. We'll put up the image, but we see the slight, like this slow dolly in, and I think it's a zoom. It's probably just a dolly in. It's just a dolly in as we cut off everyone around him, and it's just Moreland, and we see him experiencing this death. Like, he's really hit hard. He keeps that stoic facade, but he's clearly affected. And so all these various, this is one of those scenes where they probably shoot, coverage, which is movie speak for, we'll do the medium close, or we'll do the mediums, we'll do the medium closes, we'll do the close-ups, we'll do tighter. And so it's just math and editing to a certain extent, of making sure you cover the scene. But this last scene, I'm sure that it's just this one frame. That's not coverage. That's probably that pull in, that final close up. And then we get Moreland not speaking, turning around and walking away, I think, in that close up. And what's wonderful is that Becker then does that close up on Kirby, on Ronny Cox, and he closes his eyes, and just like he wants this to be over. And it's just so wonderful that he gives Kirby that last moment to really humanize him, because he knows where this is headed. And so to me, it's using the gate in a really interesting way, because it's a barrier between literally it's a barrier between these two men who are never going to meet in looking at agreeing to a surrender, agreeing to let them what they want. It's never going to happen. And so that gate serves a completely different purpose and is used effectively. So that's my scene number 4. Let's move on to our last scene number 5.
Scene 5.
So scene number 5 is a short one, and it's between Derek and Charlie, two younger cadets, Charlie is kind of Moreland's favorite. He's just a good little soldier who's been given the opportunity to leave, and he won't. And Derek is the weaker of the two. And as you see in this image, these two boys are on guard duty. They both have M16s, automatic weapons, but they're on guard duty in this pillbox behind sandbags. You'll notice here that the tank is that we saw arrive earlier, the big scary tank, is sitting in the gate, so it's reminding us that that um, that there's a that of its presence essentially, and that's going to be important because this is the event of the scene. The tank is going to be used, right? And so, but we have this back and forth as Derek slowly crumbles. And notice in these images that Derek, in the staging, what Becker does brilliantly is, first of all, in the casting, because Charlie has got this angelic little face, and Derek is this freckle-faced kid. I mean, the freckles on his face just underline how young he is. He also has them whisper. It's not like anyone's listening, but having them whisper this conversation. But mainly, if you notice, Derek is his back is in the corner of the pillbox, so he's literally backed into the corner with Charlie facing him. So we have Charlie trying to comfort him. Derek slowly just getting worse and worse and begging him. You see in these images just getting worse and worse and begging him, why don't we leave? Why don't we jump over? Because there's been other cadets throughout this story who are jumping over, right? And we underline that as well when he cuts away in this image here. You'll see someone standing guard on the wall. And I think Becker wants to make a point of saying they're not alone here. So you're not thinking these two are the only ones guarding the gate. And so he has this nervous soldier who we don't know. It gives us perspective on the tank, a POV from above, as this other cadet kind of hides behind the gates very, very quickly before we cut back in. It gives us a reference that they're not alone. And then Derek really starts to lose it. And this is the event, right? So Derek jumps over, screams, I surrender. And Charlie wants to stop him. He's his room, his bunkmate, and his best friend. And so Derek goes over. The light turns on, that big blue light that I mentioned earlier in scene 3, the arrival. That big blue spotlight turns on as Derek runs toward it. Charlie goes after him, and you have this great insert of that M16 hitting the ground, and just that single heart-rending gunshot in response hitting Charlie. So this kid we've watched throughout the movie getting cut down with that single bullet, and him falling to the ground. And we watch him fall. He covers it in, like, I think in 2 different angles we'll see in these images here as he hits the ground. And it's just on this empty cement, which is perfect. There's nothing around it. So that this body, he can shoot above. And we really get a sense of the size of of Charlie, who's been shot. Derek is already over the wall and gone. It's now Charlie's scene, right? And so Charlie, we see his last vestiges of life. We see that quick insert of his fingers trembling. We see Ronny Cox staring through the bars, watching him die. And then we see him lie still from above to really underscore his size, right? And the emptiness of that parade ground, that's not an accident, right? But what's wonderful here is how he ends the scene in this last shot, which is one of my favorite shots of the movie. You have that tank, that spotlight shining down on Charlie's body, and we hear that the light, like the power unit kind of turning off, and it's shutting down, and that light goes out, and it's just left in darkness. It still haunts me when I see that image, because it's so heartrending. Probably one of those heartrending moments of the movie, and that is my scene number 5 in looking at just great gate scenes, because I think unlike the townie who died on the other side of the gate, on this side of the gate, we care deeply about Charlie, and know that this is going to, just like that death changed everything here. they know that this death is going to change it and it's going to lead to this big finale. So that is scene number 5.
Wrap up.
All right, so that's it for this episode. That was 5 great scenes. I hope you liked what you saw. You liked the discussion. Please leave any comments if you have any thoughts. You also can kind of talk about the movie, talk about your 5 great scenes. Sometimes in these videos, I may just choose the 5 great scenes. With this one, I just from a director's point of view, I just found it really fascinating how you use one location like the gate and just elevate those scenes. They're just so expertly handled. And so this one kind of had a theme. Sometimes there will, sometimes I'm just going to select the 5 great scenes that we may know with some of the future films that I do. So with that said, please, if you like what you saw, click like and subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. And I look forward to seeing you in future episodes.